My fellow classmates, we have finally reached this day. This being the day that we have stared down for days, months, and even years. But now we start to wonder how we got here. Over the last 4 years of being in class of 2012, we've constructed ourselves an identity. To many, we are known as that loud group of students who want to push all the limits, and some of this is true. However, there is a root that drives who we are as a class. This is the notion that we have as much fun as physically possible. What I have noticed in the last 4 years of being part of this strong community of Christians is that we love to enjoy time together and goof off as much as we can. Because through this, we have grown closer. This fun we have has let us learn who the people around us are and has enabled some deep things to happen. This process all started the first day as a freshman. This was the awkward period where we all seemed to like each other, but we were all terribly scared inside. The attempt to break this uncomfortable period was only by the freshman extravaganza. And yes, it was truly extravagant. A 3-day, 2-night bonding experience was to be the cure. But it only seemed to be a strange, blurry time when we got to play games. After this period, people started to meet each other in classes. Health and fitness with learning CPR was a huge contributor to this. Nothing like lip-locking with a plastic man in front of class. We experienced our first bit of getting in trouble as a grade when Mr. G yelled at every class because he believed someone had traced the eagle with a blue marker, only to learn it was blue paint from the new floor shown up in the cracks. Not to disappoint, though, soon after we lost a break for being too messy in the halls. Soon enough, we were introduced to 2 dances that we were allowed to take part in. These, of course, being Snowball and Twerp. Over-the-top amount of costume building and dressing up took place, only to end up with being too nervous to dance with our dates. The year ended up with a strange knowledge of each other, but truly we were all hoping for more in our sophomore year. By the time sophomore year hit, we were definitely more comfortable as a class. I even had the courage to talk to girls. Our awkwardness being broken was evident at football games. Here we started a tradition of mosh pits in the sophomore student section as we scored. And people soon began able to drive. Someone thought it was even a good idea to let Kimmerfmeyer drive, and who knows? The school found it reasonable to hire a health nutritionist who decided to do crazy things with our school lunches. She even had the nerve to take our pop away, but do not fear. We had a solution solved by one man, Omar Brown. The creation of the underground pop business, easy, was a necessary addition to sophomore year, but was soon discovered and crushed by administration. Let us not forget that we again lost a set of breaks for being too messy. And then sophomore ended with a dramatic note when a railing fell off the first balcony and landed on a freshman. I remember being happy I was no longer a freshman. Soon we entered our way into junior year. This was the year we began to create a real identity as a class. As we moved into the dark and dreary lower commons, it became a home for many wonderful events. We made the lower commons ours. The commons became once a venue to live-action Star Wars duels in which Mitch Schroeder killed everyone, even those on his side. It housed dance-offs that were held monthly, in which juniors always won. We also had the luxury to trash this part of the school again, and lost some more breaks. As juniors, we were able to survive snow apocalypse, AP tests, and the lovely Mr. Booth, a man of legends and abnormal wisdom who had the ability to show our class how to give grace to one another. This was strongly illustrated at the end of the year by 2 things, the very noted Speak Chapel and the Operation Squirrel. Both had the power to allow people to be themselves and not be afraid to share with those around them. The contribution of both ended up leading to student-led faith groups known only as Roots. And then finally, we made it to senior year. It started off with Jerome Navarro showing up to school at 5 p.m. the day before orientation. He sat there until more and more people joined him through the night. Soon we filled the entire front entrance of school and were happily let into the start of the great new year. A new season of football also begun. As games started to come, we kept winning. Driven by our obnoxiously loud and vibrant crowd, our football team did some amazing things. We sent the troops to Lowell in a fashionable style and got the win. The wonderful night was capped off by storming the field and enjoying the achievement as a class. We went out to East again and pulled out a win in the craziest game I've ever seen. The season may have ended sadly, but we took this challenge into basketball season and looked for redemption. Again, the crowds in support of these games were passion-led, making friends with other teams and a guy named Young Mick. While carrying our great team to regional win, we may not have won state or in either sports, but through having one of the school's best student sections and having a great team to support, we grew even closer. Life as a senior has had its ups and downs this year as well. For some reason, we found it cool to throw anything and everything through the upper commons, which in turn resulted in losing our breaks for the 4th year in a row. This was truly an accomplishment. Being the class of 2012, we had our crazy times this year, like the silly string attack on the lower commons, or acquiring the famous chicken head. But we also had some amazing times when we became one as a class, like when the senior guys gave a rose to every senior girl, or when we got together to help others on Senior Service Day. The culmination of our identity itself we showed the culmination of our identity this past spring at our senior retreat. We learned what goofy talents some people have that make them part of our community. We shared moments of awe when people said things that resonated with everyone there. We shared moments with a sense of nervousness when we looked at the next path of our lives. And through these 4 years of change and growth as a community together, we have learned to enjoy the fun, simple things around us. We have created an identity in which we've become bonded through laughs, trials, pranks, tears, joy, and disappointment that will forever link us together as GRCHS class of 2012. Thank you.
A few years ago, I decided to climb Mount Sinai in the deep desert of Egypt to ask God what I should do with my life. What was God's plan for my life? Wasn't God supposed to have some kind of plan? I had 2 degrees. I had a degree in English, and I had a master's degree in history and geography of the First Temple period from 1054 to 586 BC. You would be hard-pressed to find 2 more useless degrees for the job market. I wasn't expecting the 10 commandments on top of Mount Sinai, just maybe a little hint. Not even a single commandment, just a little sense of direction. What should I do with my life? What's the plan? That sort of thing. So the day arrived, and I decided to climb Mount Sinai with a few graduate school friends of mine in the middle of the night so that we could see the sunrise. So we left at 2:30 in the morning, and in my mind, this was just going to be me and a couple of friends and my Bible, and I'm going to open it up, and then God's going to give me some sort of divine insight. So I set off on the trail, and right away I realized this is going to be a weird experience. I'm passing Russian women in high heels and tourists taking pictures and Bedouins offering me camel rides, like camel ride, it's too far to walk, and selling Snickers and hot chocolate and tea and things like this. So I'm a little weirded out. And I'm underdressed, but I didn't realize this until about halfway up the mountain. It's very cold in the desert, especially in Sinai, and I'm really, really underdressed, and I'm shivering, I'm shaking, and I'm starting to get a little bit nervous, like, am I going to have to go back down and find some clothing? I look down in a little, like, cleft of a rock, and I see this old ski hat that's sort of crusty and nasty, maybe Moses wore it or something, I don't know. I don't care at this point. I just put it on my head. I just shake my head, the dust is falling around, and I press on. I get to the top, and these entrepreneurial Bedouin are renting blankets for $10 a pop. So I reach into my pocket. I don't care. I give $10, and I take this nasty, gross blanket that I have to then also return when I'm done. So I go out on this little cleft of a rock, and I'm just sitting with a few people, and sure enough, the sun begins to rise, and the desert begins to change, and the colors begin to shift, and I start to get in the moment, and I get out my Bible, and the sun peaks up over the horizon, and all of a sudden, hundreds of people begin to cheer and shout, and Americans are high-fiving one another, and they're singing "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles. It's a weird experience, and I'm disappointed because God did not show up. I get no divine insight. I shake my head. I think, what a waste of time, and I head back down the mountain. On the way, I pass this little staging area where all the camels brought the lazy people up, and they're sort of resting from their night travels. And all of a sudden, this camel decides, I want to bite this man in the neck. So the camel swings around, and with a ninja move, I sort of block the camel. It opens its massive mouth and swallows my arm. And my elbow is halfway down the throat of the camel. And the camel is ripping on my arm. I can feel it coming out of socket, and he's angry. I'm looking at the camel in the face. I begin saying words that have never been uttered on Mount Sinai ever. I break most of the commandments right there on the spot. And I realize this is a matter of life and death. I am going to die on top of Mount Sinai. What is God's plan for my life? Death. So the only thing I can think to do is to wind up and punch the camel directly in the face. So I take my left arm, which is free, and I begin to swing toward the camel, and all of a sudden I have this image in my mind of a Bedouin leaping on my back with one of those Lawrence of Arabia knives and slitting my throat and saying, "Don't touch my camel." So I go for it anyway. I say, throw caution to the wind. I swing. The moment I swing, he lets go. And I'm looking this camel in the face, into his deep, dark, evil eyes. He takes a little breath and then blows snot all over my face. This reminds me of a verse from the Bible. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Now, I'm sorry to say, but this is one of the more abused and misused verses in the entire Bible. If you just back up a little bit, you realize it's about the nation of Israel. And God also says, first I'm going to punish you and then send you into exile for 70 years, and then I will bring you back, for I know the plans I have for you. So which is it? Prosperity or exile? That's my question for you. I don't really know the answer. I don't know what God's plans are for you. I do know this: you don't know what they are. And in some ways, you have to live as if you don't know what the plan is. I think you ought to expect to be surprised. In some ways, I guarantee you life will surprise you. In fact, life is not really about you any more than the verse in Jeremiah is really about you. Life is not about you. In fact, I think you are about life. But we live in a culture, a sort of I am special culture, where you get a little button when you're in the first grade that says I am special. This is a fine message when you're in the first grade. But it will not help you very much when you're a freshman in college or when you're in the workforce. You can't just keep telling people, wait a minute, I'm special. If you keep thinking that you're so special, I think you'll feel entitled to health and wealth and fame, and I think this is a dangerous lie. Like I said, life is not about you. You are about life. That's a quotation from the Franciscan Richard Rohr. Instead, you get the privilege of living life. And we need you to live the life that you've been given. I promise you there will be both exile and there will be prosperity. There will be confusion and there will be clarity. There will be divine encounters and there will be wicked camels. You need to climb a few ladders, as Thomas Merton says, only to realize that you're leaning against the wrong wall. You need to climb Mount Sinai and not find what you're looking for. I think this is what makes life an adventure. Mary Oliver, the poet, says, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life?" One thing I'm sure of, if you want to get the most out of this one wild and precious life, you have to leave home. It's built into the biblical narrative. Adam and Eve had to leave the garden. Abraham had to leave Mesopotamia. Ruth had to leave Moab. David had to leave Bethlehem. Jesus had to leave Nazareth. Peter had to leave his nets. It's built in. It's an essential part of the spiritual life. You have to leave home. You have to leave the familiar. If you don't, you won't grow up very well. And there are a lot of people in our culture that refuse to grow up. We need you to take massive risks. We need you to never stop looking for what your passions are. We need you to set out towards Sinai, not really knowing the way. We need you, like Odysseus in the Odyssey, to row toward Ithaca, even though you don't really know how to get there. All real growth involves leaving home, leaving what you know, leaving what's familiar, leaving what's safe. Jesus says, anyone who has left father or mother or brother or sister for my sake will not fail to receive as much in this life and in the one to come. So don't make excuses like, well, when I graduate, then I'll sort things out, because you're just going to say the same thing if you go to college. Well, when I graduate, then I will. And then it'll be like, well, when I get into the workforce, when I get my first career, then I will. Then it will be, well, when I get married, then I will. And then it will, well, when I have kids, then I will. And then it will be, well, when the kids get out of the house, then I will. And then it will be when I retire. And the next thing you know, you're laying in bed with an IV saying, hey, when I get this IV out, then we'll do this thing. Jesus says, do not worry about tomorrow. Stay present to your own life. Don't put off living. The now is all you get. You don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. You have no idea. I might die right here on the spot. Boom, to dust you shall return. You'd remember it. So live now. Live in the now. Will God tell you what to do with your life? I doubt it. I don't know. I doubt it. I will say this. On this crazy adventure, you probably just need this one short prayer. Thy will be done. This is not a prayer that requires a concrete answer. God may never answer you in any direct way. It's a prayer that embraces tension. A tension that says, on the one hand, it's time to venture into the unknown, to take risks, to climb ladders, to follow your passions, to get disappointed, to have a few successes. And at the same time, somewhere in the center of your being, you are also whispering, thy will be done now in me. Which reminds me of a little song. Let's do this. Check. Let's stand.